How long does it take to monetize an audience? What's a good call to action? It's all coming up today with a Hall of Fame podcaster, which of course is not me, it's my guest. We'll get to him in a second. But welcome into It's Not Just Talking. I'm your executive producer and non-Hall of Famer, Vince Quinn, here to help you sharpen your podcast strategy, improve your production processes, and build your hosting skills so that you can put more time back into growing your business. And on today's show, we're joined by Dave Jackson. So Dave is the host of the School of Podcasting. He's also the author of Profit from Your Podcast, Proven Strategies to Turn Listeners into a Livelihood. So what better guy to talk to about all of these things with building an audience and monetizing off of it? Here's our conversation. So Dave Jackson, Podcast Hall of Famer, an important question for you. How long does it take to grow an audience?
Vince, nobody likes my answer. When I did research, I wrote a book called Profit from Your Podcast. And when I talked to people and I said, how long did it take you to make, more than Mountain Dew money? And they all said around 3 years. They 2 to 3, but then they go, really, it's more like 3. And it's kind of funny because it makes me look kind of like I've got some sort of, psychic powers. I remember once we're at an event and we're watching a panel and somebody asked, like, how long did it take you to really make money with your podcast? And I look at the guy next to me and I go, watch, he's going to say 3 years. And the guy was like, really about 3 years. And I think the reason for that is the first year you're awful because as much as you should have gotten some feedback before you launched, you didn't because you were in a hurry. So you put out what was a rough draft. And then you finally get some feedback from people not named Mom, because Mom loves it. And then you start to shape your show, and you're getting to really know who you're talking to. So you end up with a good show finally, and now your audience starts telling their friends about it. And so that's kind of year 2. So by the time you get to year 3, it's kind of growing on its own. The thing is, it's not hockey stick by any means. It is a slow, painful growth at times because we're a microwave society. We want it in 10 to 15 seconds. And it's like, no. And it really doesn't even matter. Some people are like, well, I have 1,500 people or 15,000 people. I've seen that. I have 15,000 people on Instagram, but I've only got 300 downloads. And I'm like, yep, those people like to watch. You're, doing something they want to listen. And even if you're doing YouTube, moving from one platform to another is really, it takes a lot of work to get to it. So yeah, usually around 3 years.
Yeah. So let me ask you then, because you said something that was really interesting there, where you're talking about audience. People typically said they started to really monetize it and have the audience at 3 years. So first off, when they're talking about an audience, then is that a size thing? Like, how do they define audience? Or is it really looked at just, I have enough people listening that whatever I'm doing for monetization is enough money?
Yeah, I think they were looking at the money, not so much because I asked them, like, how long did it take to make sizable money? And they were like, oh, it took about 3 years. And I think that's because the audience is growing. The other really horrible stat that I kept coming across is, especially if you're doing something like some sort of crowdfunding, be it Patreon or you're selling a book or whatever, and that is about 3% of your audience is going to take action. And I was like, really? And it was weird because I talked to the people at Teachable that have a platform for selling courses. They said 2%, and I lucked out last year. I ended up getting invited to one of those tiny concerts at NPR, and at the end they're like, "Hey, join us on the terrace or whatever." And I just happened to be sitting next to the guy that runs NPR Plus, which is their kind of bonus content thing. I said, "I'm not trying to get into your wallet or anything like that, but like, what percentage do you usually see?" And he said 1. And so and look, I've fallen into that trap. You're like, look, if I could get 50% of my audience to give me $5 and you're like, you're not going to get 50. And like, okay, 25. Nope. You're not going to get, I know people that get somewhere between 5 and 10, but they're super duper niche. They're like one guy does a show all about model trains. So not a ton of those. And the people that are into that hobby are really into that hobby. So it's called Around the Layout. Ray Arnott runs that. And his community is just crazy about that topic and crazy about him.
Yeah, and that's one of the fascinating things is those different lanes, right? So that's a super niche show, and it's an entertainment show, I would guess, right? Does he have like a service that he's offering with that, or it really is? It's entertainment. He's just talking about that industry, that hobby, and everything community-wise there.
That's it. It's like, hey, here's this new company has a new product out, and this is that, and like it was funny because he goes, I want to do a show that's not political, but we have to talk about tariffs because some of this stuff is coming from overseas, and the price is going to go up, and of course, that turned into a political discussion whether he wanted it to. He's like, this is just a fact. Everything's going to go up, and so, but yeah, that's and what he's done is he doesn't treat his sponsors as like, oh, this is somebody I'm going to talk about on my show. Like the one guy he talks about on his show, and this guy ships whatever model train parts or whatever it is, and they worked a deal where he has a stamp. He gave him a stamp that has his logo and his website on it, and every time this guy ships something, he stamps it with Ray's logo and website, and then Ray, so they're going to, it's going to the person that Ray is trying to get a hold of. So he calls them marketing partners. Yes, they're paying him, but he goes, I'm really looking for somebody that can, help amplify my message. And we
Thanks for listening to the show.
So
Make sure to subscribe to the newsletter to get more podcast insights. That link is in the show notes. And if you're feeling stuck with your podcast, let's figure it out together. Book a free 10-minute chat with me. The link to do that is also in the show notes. Talk to you next week.
Services, all that kind of thing. And same thing for the business coaches and real estate people and things like that we work with, where I have a real estate client, for example, that partnered up. So they're an agent, and they partnered up with a real estate lender, and now they're doing the show together, and they're running events together, and all these other things. And what's great about it from that side is they've been able to monetize through the show being essentially brand new, maybe 3-4 months in, and 25 to 40 downloads an episode. Like, it's nothing crazy, but they've been able to monetize that way. And as much as that's effective, and I preach that, there is the other side where people still want the numbers, and ultimately everybody wants to see that, right? So when you're going then from this, whichever way you're monetizing the show, and you're trying to grow this audience and build relationships with people, I mean, what are some of those things that you've seen? Are there any commonalities of ways that people go about this, from I've got nobody listening, it's just mom listening, to it is year 3 and I have this audience that is worth monetizing?
Yeah, I mean, growing your audience really boils down to figuring out who your audience is, and it can't be everybody, because even if you go, all right, it's men 25 to 50. Well, I'm here to tell you, there's a big difference between somebody who's 25 and somebody who's 50. So you have to kind of figure that out, and then whoever that is, what do they want? Like, what's their problems? What's their pain point? Whatever it is, if you're trying to make money, what's their pain point? Because if you think about it, when we pull out our wallet, it's usually for something we need or something we want, or if I've got a headache, I will pay for aspirin. If I'm hungry, I will pay for food. That kind of thing. And then it's just and it sounds simple, and it kind of is. Figure out who your audience is and what they want, and give it to them. But it also has to be, so that's the content, but there's also the delivery, and it can't be done with a no energy, monotone voice that today that's just, and I'm exaggerating, but not by much. And it can't be 3 people sharing one microphone. It just, and it doesn't have to be $1,000 rig, but you got, it drives me nuts when I talk to authors and they want to use the built-in laptop microphone. And I'm like, nope, not on my show. And they're like, well, it works for Zoom. Yeah, that's great. Zoom is meant for you and the other person in the meeting. This is meant for the public. And so, yeah, so it really does boil down to that. So I spend a lot of time on Reddit, and not so much to chime in, although I do, but also a lot of Facebook groups. I used to hang out in Quora, not as much anymore, but anytime I can hang out, especially in person, I love to just go be a fly on the wall, because then I'm not wondering what my audience needs. I can hear what they need. Like, I just did an episode about running a community, and there was some really cool stuff, like maybe a freemium model isn't great and all this other stuff. Why? Because I had 3 people in my community that are starting a community. And I was like, well, I know people want this. And so, and I had a guy on that could answer the question how to do a good interview. And that's something I've talked about a bazillion times, but he had some really cool points, so I brought him on. And then, so growing your podcast, one of the benefits is you do grow your network, so that's good. But I also do solo shows. I always say an interview show will grow your network, a solo show will grow your influence. And so you were talking about, small business owners. The best way to monetize your show is make you the sponsor. Because when you show up on a regular basis, whether that's weekly or bi-weekly or whatever your schedule is, you're seen as reliable. And then when you give them good content, and they go, hey, I tried that thing and it actually worked. Okay, then they like you. And then if you can somehow, I always say if you can make a point with a personal story. So I remember once, this was years ago, but Muhammad Ali, the boxer, died. And he was kind of a hero of mine when I was growing up. And so I didn't really want to talk about podcasting, but that's what my show's about. And so I was like, here are 5 things podcasters can learn from Muhammad Ali. Because number one, everybody was writing and searching for him. So let's go play in internet traffic. And it was like, okay, he's completely original, really talented, always promoting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that had people emailing me going, hey, he's my champ too, buddy. So anytime you can make a story or make a point with a personal story, they get to know you. So then they trust you, they like you, and everything you talk about works. So when you go, oh, by the way, I've got this new book, I've got a course, I've got this, I've got that, you've kind of gone from a cold lead to a warm lead.
That's such a fascinating thing, and I love that because the crossover element, I think, is one of the harder struggles of being a business owner and making content that's around what you do, right? How do you have these stories where you're talking about something that helps people and solves their problem, but at the same time can have some level of broader appeal and reach out? And that's something that we've talked a lot about. You just met Taylor, my business partner, just before the show. Like, we have these conversations a lot of, hey, how can we cross over more and find those ways to connect with a broader community? And I think that's a real struggle day in and day out is, okay, I'm a business coach, so I talk about leadership all the time. So maybe Muhammad Ali is an example there, right? Like the ways that he goes about it. Or you talk about different coaching staffs with NFL teams and how those people are examples of leadership. But I love that idea of finding, here's something in pop culture that people care about and has this broad appeal, and you can naturally bring your audience or bring people into your audience through that, and at the same time naturally sell what you do. I think that's a real challenge, but done well, it can be great.
Well, that's it. A lot of people miss that last thing you just mentioned, which is you still have to sell your stuff. And so we focus so much on the who and what, and really the what is where you look at, here's my why and here's my who. And when they overlap, that's your what. What am I going to talk about that's going to educate and entertain the who while moving them towards my why? And so many times people forget the why. They're like, oh, I'm going to do a show about how to be a badass so that you can be bold and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, great. So the audience can do what again? Well, they're going to be bold. Oh, okay. Well, but once they get bold, they won't need your show anymore, right? Because you will have taught them. I'm like, what's the goal? I'm like, if you're a coach, then you got to promote that. I had a friend of mine, and within a year, I helped her launch a podcast, and she'd been doing it in about 6 months. And I said, how's it going? She's like, yeah, numbers are going up, looking good. She goes, but I'm not getting any speaking gigs. And I go, I've known you about a year. I go, you do speaking gigs? And she goes, yeah, I just spoke to a bunch of high school kids in the Bronx. And I go, that's amazing. And she goes, yeah, I'm not getting any calls. I go, I've listened to all of your episodes. I've never heard you mention that you do speaking. And she said, of course, I kind of feel kind of salesy. And I go, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I said, here, you ready? You're ready for your next big commercial? I go, start off your next episode like this. I was talking to a bunch of high school kids in the Bronx this week, and this young man came up to me and asked me this question. And I thought that would be a great topic for an episode. So today we're going to talk about blah, blah, blah. I go, there you go. Everybody now knows you talk to high school kids. Or just say, I was talking with a client and someone said this. I go, you don't have to say who it is and you can keep your privacy. I go, but if they don't know you do that stuff, they're not just going to randomly, sit there and go, I wonder if Vince does coaching. No, you have to let people know, what you do.
100%. And working that in, it's that preparation aspect that goes into doing these shows and doing it well, right? So here's my topic. Here's some experience that I've had with that and how I can relate that to the overall story so you can incorporate this into your business. Like laying all those things out together and doing it consistently, it's a hard thing to do because people are so distracted on, well, is this too in the weeds and am I eliminating too many people? And it's like you said with the show about model trains, right? No, you're talking about the exact things that you do and showcasing your personality and how you solve those problems, and by making it one-to-one, it's so much easier.
If you're listening to this, chances are that your business podcast is struggling, but you're not sure what's holding it back. That's why I created the Podcast Compass Quiz, and in just 5 minutes, you'll get clarity on what's working, what's not, and where to focus your energy next. Best part? It's completely free. So hit the link in the show notes to take the quiz now.
Dave, I think you hit on something that's really important here, because as you're building, whether you're building the audience or you have the audience, the call to action is huge. And so thinking about it from this business standpoint, how should people, when they're doing a call to action for their business, whether they're scared of being salesy or not, like what's a good way to approach this to get a podcast audience and turn them into a customer?
Yeah, let's start with what not to do. Please rate and review us. It helps us get found. Because number one, if they do rate and review you, there's no way that you can contact that person and go, thanks for the rating and review. And number two, it doesn't help you get found. Apple has come out and said this has nothing to do with the algorithm, how many people follow and how far they listen, but reviews have nothing to do with the algorithm. So for me, a better one is some sort of lead magnet, because now I got your email address, and in the email, I can ask you to rate and review. I can also ask you to buy my stuff. I can ask you, hey, I'm thinking of doing this episode in the future. Do you think, is this something that would interest you? So now you've got a built-in focus group. There's all sorts of things. So for me, the best call to action, there are two, and I always try to pick one. One is either join my email list and get this free, whatever it is. Something that, again, because you hang out with your potential customers, you know what the pains are, and this is going to help them. Or number two, tell a friend. I had a guy on my show. He does a show called the Darknet Diaries. Get something ridiculous, like 300,000 downloads an episode. And I said, okay, Jack, I go, what's the magic sauce here? And he goes, well, before I launched, I created a couple episodes and I said, here, go and listen to this. And then I would ask them, how far did you listen? And if they didn't say all the way, I'd say, how far did you get and why did you stop? And then number three was, on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to share this with someone else? And he said, and if I got a 7 or below, I was like, all right, back to the drawing board. And so he knew he had a good episode. He knew he had, tweaked it enough to where, okay, this is good. And he said, I slowly and specifically and confidently ask people to share the show. And I listened to him. He was like, hey, we're at the 29-minute mark. If you could do me a favor, today we're talking about whatever he was talking about. If you know somebody else who's interested in this, could you do me a favor and just go to your phone? There's that little share button. If you could just share this with one friend, boy, it would just mean it would just make my heart warm. It'd be so great. Or you could just tell them to go to darknetdiaries.com. So I listened to Jack and I was like, okay, great. What else do you do? And he goes, that's kind of it. And so then I started listening to other people. And again, we start to feel salesy. We're not comfortable doing self-promotion. And it'd be like, hey, if you want to, you don't have to. I mean, it's okay. But our website is .com. Thanks. And I'm like, what was that? And he was slowly, specifically, and confidently. And I was like, And it's one of those things where, and he did it at the end. And he's like, hey, if you're still here, obviously you liked this. And it's kind of a way, there's psychologically, there's got to be something there. It's like, yes, this is valuable, because otherwise I just wasted 29 minutes. And I am going to share it with my friend. And he even say things like, your friend's going to think you're awesome because you just passed along this great information and I get to grow my audience. So it's a win-win. So there are all sorts of different things. But I know when I look at reports, they always say like somewhere between 60 and 70% of podcast discovery is done via word of mouth. So he's just dumping gas on word of mouth.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those elements of podcasting that I really like, but I don't see it as much as I think I should, which is podcasting almost being like albums back in the day. I remember being in high school, having a CD book just full of all of these different albums, and they were burned discs and all those kinds of things because people were, hey, check this out, check that out. Have you heard this? No, I haven't. Oh, well, I listened to this show. Okay, well, you would love that one. So something about that recommendation engine and getting that going, word of mouth, I think it's great when you get it. I do think it's been harder to do, and people feel like they almost feel like they're burning the call to action. Because it's, hey, I'm trying to sell, right? So I want to sell this service. I want to sell this thing. So to promote the show of just, hey, share the show almost feels like I'm losing this opportunity to sell. But a couple of things that I'm really focusing my energy on for me with this show and what I'm doing with clients as I bring them in and work with them. One is because there are a lot of small audiences, no calls to action up front. Get to the meat of it, bring people in, build a relationship, let's do this thing. And then, later you can do the call to action. And then the second part of it is I'm actually trying to do 2 calls to action. One of them being top of the funnel, which is going to be, hey, go to the newsletter. And I've got all this weekly information for you and hey, go subscribe and do that. And then later in the show, then it's, hey, you have listened to this. If you need a call, go and do it. And so just from you seeing all of this with audience building, with calls to actions, what do you think about that?
Yeah, unless somebody has a gun to your head, do not start off the show with a commercial, because if that's the first impression for me, I'm like, well, let's see, there are 7 other shows about this subject. I'm not listening to this one because this guy doesn't have me in mind. He has himself because he's just promoting whatever, some probably product that isn't even related to the subject. So no, thank you. I always put my calls to action in the middle. And the reason for that is, like you said, get them hooked, get them listening, and get the phone in their pocket, or get the phone in the whatever the thing is in the car, right? So that when the ad comes along, it's a little harder to skip, hit the skip button, and then they hear it. I also, I usually have either 30 or 60 seconds, and then I have like a little baby 15-second one just for my newsletter. So I'll be promoting the School of Podcasting. And when that's over, it's like, hey, want more information? Check out podcastingobservations.com. And it's just a quick, and I realize a 15-second commercial isn't much, but I'm just trying to beat that domain into their head. So there's that. And then I do one at the end. It's usually like, hey, because again, you've made it this far. Obviously, you're serious about this. Don't forget, I mentioned it earlier, use the coupon code listener, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. And then, sometimes in there, I'll share the show. Because I realize, number one, I am horrible at doing one call to action. I preach it all the time. It's hard to do just one. And so there are times when I'm like, hey, if you're liking this show, don't forget to share it with a friend. And hey, if you're going out to schoolofpodcasting.com, while you're there, click the join now button and use the coupon code. So it's kind of like, all right. But it is hard to do just one. But I had a client once that had 8 and was wondering why he wasn't getting any kind of traction on those. I go, do you really think after the 3rd call to action they're going to remember 4, 5, 6? And I'm like, no. So it's easier said than done.
Yeah, it's a really hard and to be consistent with it, to have it scripted into the show of, hey, we're going to hit around this point, we're going to have this read, or we're playing this ad, and then later in the show we're going to do this read, this ad. I actually just had an episode that recently came out about show blocking. So, hey, how are you structuring your show, and where are you layering these things within it so you're properly hitting those points and delivering all of that information? It's hard to do. And it takes a lot of work. It's a constant evolution to look at your show, what's working, and incorporate that stuff. And I think that's the double challenge is, as a business owner, you're also trying to build a business. And is your offer good? Are you talking to the right people? Are you expressing what that offer is well? So figuring out all of those things, it can drive people crazy. So the understanding of, hey, here's how to approach a CTA. I mean, yeah, everything I've heard, seen, like one call to action. If you need to hit 2 things, you do it at separate points, and you leverage it that way. But Dave, I want to talk a little bit more about sponsorships for a minute here, because it is one of those things that, as much as I preach to people, hey, you got to build the audience. It takes time. You reinforce that right up front. When people get to sponsorship, what does it look like? What kind of audience do you need to get sponsored? What kind of rates can you expect? How much money can you expect to make? What the Mountain Dew money even, right? What does that look like to start making that sponsorship money?
Well, all podcast questions begin with the same 2 words, which is it depends, because it does. And so, like Ray with the Around the Layout show doesn't get anywhere near 10,000 downloads, which is about the small, and that's per episode, that you need to get a, shall we call it, a big sponsor, the Mattress People, the et cetera, Better Helps. They really want about 20,000, but maybe they might look at you for 10. And so I'm going to get nowhere near that. I do a podcast about podcasting, but yet I've had sponsors. And I remember I walked into Podcast Movement and Dan from Focusrite said, "You're Dave Jackson." And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "I want to give you money." And I'm like, "All right, nice to meet you, Dan." And because I had his target audience, which was podcasters, and he sells podcaster stuff. And so we worked a deal. I don't do CPM stuff, even though we all know that once I give them a dollar amount, they're going to ask how many downloads I get, and then they're going to do the math. That's fine, but I don't want to have to deal with, well, now we're at 9,000 instead of 8 or what. It's like, no, it's per episode, per X amount of weeks, and then what you can do too is instead of just selling, a spot in your podcast, you can say, well, actually, it's funny you ask. Right now, we're running a deal. So it's X amount of money to be featured on the website. It's X amount of money to be featured in the podcast and the show notes, and X amount of money to be featured in the newsletter. And so right now, if you buy all three, we've got a special deal, a minimum buy of 3 months, X amount of money. And then it kind of depends in terms of how much to charge. Number one, we all undercharge because especially if we have a niche audience, I don't know why, we just undervalue ourselves. So I always say, raise the price up until you start to feel uncomfortable, because you do want it to be a win for the sponsor as well. But when it starts to get uncomfortable, you're probably in the right part. Maybe go one notch higher and stay there, because I've done that in the past where I'll be like, well, it's $200 an episode. And they'd be like, okay. And I'm like, oh man, they didn't even are you sure? How? They were just, oh, good. Okay. And I was like, all right, could have gone higher, so, in terms of pricing and how does it look like? And then you want to be very specific, like, okay, it's going to be X amount of, it's a 60-second ad, because they will give you 5 minutes of stuff to read. And you're like, yeah, I can't do that in a minute. So maybe use some of it for the first ad and some of it for the second. Some places want you to send them a copy of what you said. So you have to kind of cut that out and send it to them separately, or some places okay if you can send them a link with like a timestamp, things like that. But they want a little proof that you did it, And then the other thing that I do is I use there's all sorts of link trackers. So I use one called switchy.io. And so I know how much traffic I'm sending to them. And so that way at the end, I can say, hey, look, I've sent you this many people that clicked on the link. And that's not even counting the people that just, if they set up something like, their website.com/Dave, okay, I want them to track that as well. Because in the end, the contract's going to be up and you have to prove that you sent them traffic. And hopefully they have something, especially if it's a coupon code, it's easy then to say, well, that one came from me.
Yeah, and I've been through that stuff before with referral codes and everything. I hate that stuff, man. It drives me nuts. It's a miserable place to be. Not always guaranteeing that people will use your code, or you know what I mean? It's just such a messy thing, and that's why it's been a relief on some level to work with business owners and get out of the entertainment side, because it's, hey, you have a service, sell that service. It's high ticket. It's very simple. You get 1 or 2 sales a year. You might have made all your money back on podcasting and then some, and you can take it from there. But same thing, pricing issues, right? I don't want to price my services too much. I'm worried about scaring people off. Like, it's that same thing with advertising budgets for the show. So it happens everywhere. Dave, I want to ask you one final question, because you have so much experience being around all of these shows, podcasting yourself, being a Hall of Famer, all the different things. If you were building an audience today for a brand new show from scratch, what is the number one thing you would do?
It all starts with who is this, the two questions, who is this for and why am I doing it? Because if you don't, again, educate or entertain the who, you're never going to grow an audience. And if I don't get my why, then I'm going to burn out. So like right now, I have for about the 5th time brought back a show about Akron, Ohio. And the only reason I'm doing it is I want to play in the local space. Because it turns out, as much as I've lived here my whole life, I don't really care that much about Akron, Ohio. Like, it's a cool place and all, but it's not like, yeah, Akron #1. No. And I really need, if I were to do this properly, I would be out being a reporter. I'd be out talking to local businesses and stuff, and I just don't have time for that. So I'm not doing what I really should be, so I can't really go, hey, I'm not getting any downloads. Yeah, guess what? You're not doing, I'm just basically regurgitating what the newspaper and some other local sites are doing. So I'm giving them content that's organized in a way you normally don't get. I can't say I'm giving you content you can't get anyplace else because, well, you can.
Dave, we've been building up to this call to action, Dave. We've got them here. They've been listening for 32 minutes. Like, what is the call to action? Dave Jackson, I want to keep up with you.
Yeah, since we're talking to people who may be looking to start a podcast, I've got a free gift. Go to schoolofpodcasting.com/checklist, and that is my podcast launch checklist. It'll walk you through, what do I need to do next? Like, a lot of people love to start out and go by media hosting. And I'm like, yep, don't need that yet because you don't have any media to host. So it'll get you going not only, towards a podcast, but it will get you going in the right direction at the right time. So that's schoolofpodcasting.com/checklist.
There we go. Excellent work. Excellent work. The pressure was on and you nailed it. So very, very
Thank you, kind sir.
All right. Well, David, this was great, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. And let's stay in touch. There's plenty more I wish we could have talked about today, honestly. I think there's a million things to get into with you. So let's keep in touch and appreciate the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Vince.
Thanks for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe to the newsletter to get more podcast insights. That link is in the show notes. And if you're feeling stuck with your podcast, let's figure it out together. Book a free 10-minute chat with me. The link to do that is also in the show notes. Talk to you next week.